Hello, and welcome to the Art of Being Human. Last time I talked to you, I told you that I would be dealing with abuse. There are many people who are abused, children, adults, and it changes the way you think about yourself. It changes the way that you look about the future. It changes the way that you look at your goals. It has such a pervasive effect upon your life, what you accomplish, what you feel you can't accomplish, your sense of self-worth or lack thereof, that I really want to get into it. And the reason I want to get into it is that it's going to change the way that you have relationships with other people. It's going to change whether you allow people to have relationships with you. It is an all-pervasive and very important thing. So today we're going to be dealing with abuse, and I'll be talking to you about that. If you are, with the purpose of it is to learn what it does to relationships, because this whole segment has to do with building healthy relationships. If you have been abused, and almost everybody I speak to has had some abuse in their lives. I'm not saying that 100% of people that I know have been abused, but I know a lot of people that have been. You can be abused as a child by having excessive punishment. People punish too hard. You get spanked too hard. You get yelled at. You get screamed at. Some horrible things happen. I know of a person who was tied to curtains, and then the curtains were set on fire. This is a small child. And the punishment was to make him be afraid because he might burn up. And the thing is, he could have. So, I mean, there's tons and tons of stories I could tell you about how bad abuse can get. And I don't want to get into that because I don't want the show to be a downer. But if you have been abused because you've been sexually abused, slapped, hit, burned, kicked, thrown downstairs, you know the whole gamut of how bad abuse can get. But excessive punishment and physical abuse, they go together. Emotional abuse, a lot of screaming and yelling and telling you that you're no good, you'll never amount to anything. I wished I didn't have you. I wished you weren't my kid. I mean, it gets to be horrendous. It gets to be absolutely horrendous. That would be emotional abuse in which you are somehow made to feel that you are not worthy, that you have no good points about you at all, and it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And abandonment. I've known parents who have threatened to leave their kids. You make me mad, I'm going to leave, and you're going to have to raise yourself. I will not raise you like this. And they threaten abandonment. No child can stand the threat of being abandoned, because every child knows they can't take care of themselves. They're not old enough. They're not big enough. And because of that, it just does horrible things to them. I'm so bad that you won't love me. I know of a case, it's not a case I worked with, I'm not revealing anything confidential, of a boy who commits suicide. And the reason he commits suicide was he thought that his parents would finally love him if he was gone. So he killed himself. And because the tragedy is, one, he lost his life. Two, he's never going to know whether his parents are going to accept him or love him because he wasn't there. I mean, but this is the way a child would think. What do I have to do to get your attention? What do I have to do to get you to love me? Do I have to injure myself? Do I have to kill myself? Do I have to do something horrible so you'll pay attention to me? And the fear of abandonment is, how am I going to take care of myself? How am I going to make sure I have enough food and clothes? Or if a person is sick, if they feel abandoned, how am I going to have the medication that I need to even survive? How am I going to accomplish any of my own goals? Abuse is just awful. There's no need to experience it. There's no excuse to inflict abuse upon anybody else. I have no sympathy with people who are abusers, except to say that most people who abuse were themselves abused. If a person was abused by over punishment, they were hit too much, they were punched out, because they consider that to be discipline, oftentimes they consider it to be discipline, it's really abuse, but they don't look at it that way. Because the parent is not going to say, I'm abusing you because I'm angry. What they will say is, this is discipline to make you a better person. And the double message of that, and remember I've told you can't use double messages because they don't make any sense, is I love you, but I'm going to hit you, kick you, throw you down the stairs, be very angry at you, yell and scream, and that proves my love. Well, any child knows that's not true. So what do I have to do to be loved? What can I do to avoid the punishment? Any kind of punishment that you get that's excessive is abuse, and it leads to post-traumatic stress disorder. We will be getting into that as time goes on. False beliefs about yourself. What you think about yourself changes, and it's usually in a negative way. False beliefs, thoughts, and emotions, fears, many, many, many fears, and behavior disorders, because you're going to have to act out. You're going to do something to express the fact behaviorally of what you are. If you've been told you're no good, you've never been any good, I wished I didn't have you, what's a child going to do? They're going to act out and prove that that statement is true. There is something about abuse of a child. If you abuse a child and you let them think that they don't have any worth at all, they're going to do things to prove to you that you're right and they really don't have any worth. That means they're going to act out in a negative way. Well, why would they do that? Well, they would do that because they feel that they probably are as bad as you say they are, and if they are as bad as you say they are, then they've got to prove that it's true. A person will try to prove what is true about the things that are said about them. If you say to a child, you are really smart, you're doing really well, I'm so proud of you. You're not perfect, but that's okay. I don't know of a perfect kid. I wasn't perfect when I was a kid either. So you are just wonderful. Then what are they going to do? They're going to try to prove the parent true. They're going to do good things. They're going to try to do well in school. They're going to try to be the kind of person that their parents say that they are. And that, of course, is going to cause the parent to praise them even more because they're accomplishing what the parent wants them to accomplish. The way to allow a child to grow is to support them and let them know how important they are and let them know how much you love them and work with them on it. And don't get upset because they're not perfect. I was at the movies one day. I rarely go to the movies. I don't even like them. But this was a few years ago, and I was at the movies, and there was a woman in front of me, and she had a little girl about 6 years old, and I was complimenting her at how well behaved the child is. And she said to me, well, she's not perfect yet. She's 6 years old, so she's not perfect yet. And I wanted to tell her, and I don't know if I did or not, she's never going to be perfect. You're never going to be perfect either. Don't expect perfection, because if you expect perfection and the child can't meet it, and what child can, they're going to feel like total failures. You know, one of the sad things about suicide, and I will be getting into suicidology because I've kind of done a lot of extra training and dealt with suicidal people, but one of the sad parts about suicide is the fact you have so many young people committing suicide that you would think have everything to live for. They get good grades, they get scholarships, they're head of the debate team, they're doing wonderful things in school, and then the next thing you know, they're dead because they commit suicide. And people will scratch their heads and say, how come? They were so good. They had everything to live for. They had a wonderful future ahead of them. And all of that is true, but the one thing they couldn't do was to be perfect. And if they did anything wrong at all, and they weren't perfect, they felt that they had disappointed everybody, and therefore they were worthless because they couldn't match what they thought was a demand of the adult world around them. In other words, I may be very, very good, but if I miss this test and don't get an A, that means I failed. So if I'm not perfect all the time, then I'm a failure. And it's not like I just failed a test or got a B instead of an A. I have failed everybody. I'm absolutely worthless. I'm no good. I can't do everything right. So when you raise a child, you have to let them know that they're not going to be perfect, and you don't expect that. And when I work with kids, I would always say, don't be ashamed if you get something wrong. Don't be ashamed if you have a problem understanding something. I'm a teacher. You come to me and I'll help you to understand it as best as I can. But don't be ashamed of yourselves. You're a human being. And I would always say to kids, welcome to the club of being a human being. And if I was seeing somebody in counseling and they didn't do things right, I would say, well, you know what? You're a human being. And it's all right to be a human being because that's what God made you. You're not going to be perfect, and I'm not going to be perfect. So we do the best that we can, and we can achieve greatness doing as best as we can. But we can never expect to be perfect because perfection is only something that God can achieve, not the human being. But that doesn't mean we can't do well. We can do very well. So when I work with the kids and I encourage them to do well, if they make a mistake, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. And if they don't make a mistake and they do everything right, that's great. But they will have their share of mistakes. So you have to be careful when you raise a child that you take an intermediate stance. You don't praise them to the point where they feel they have to have perfection, and if they make one little mistake or one little misstep, that somehow they've destroyed their lives. And on the other hand, you can't give them permission just to slough off and not do what they have the ability to do. You have to take that mid-range, help them to do everything they can do, but don't expect they're going to be perfect all the time. Okay, now I've said that. Behavior of a child is dependent upon how people see him, how people work with them, and we can do a lot to help a child to avoid depression, which they will get if they feel that they're not good enough. Now I'm going to take and put this down and put another little chart up here. What will happen if a person has been abused, and if you're listening or if you're watching and you've been abused, I would trust that you would have some, maybe not all, but some of these feelings. False beliefs about yourself. Negative expectations. I'll be getting into these more later on. I would like to get into each one and talk about them as time goes on. Negative expectations. You never expect anything good to happen to you, because as far as you're concerned, nothing good has ever happened to you. I was talking with a lady who was going to be starting a group, and she was not a professional, she was not a counselor, she did not have any psychological training. And she said, I'm going to have them get in a group, and it was, I don't know, it's like recovery from drug use or something like that, and have them tell me everything good that's happened to them, to focus on the positive rather than the negative. And I said, be careful of that. I was very leery of it. Because what if a person honestly doesn't believe that anything good has ever happened to them? Oh, that's not a problem. Everybody has good things happen to them. You say that because that's the way it is with you, but not everybody's you. What if a person was raised in an alcoholic home or a drug-addicted home, and they were continually abused, and they honestly felt that they didn't have anything good that happened to them? Oh, I wouldn't worry about that. That's not going to happen. Well, she wanted me to become a part of the group, and I wouldn't do it. because I was too leery of it. It just didn't seem quite right to me. And wouldn't you know, when she had them in there and she says, I want you to tell me, each one of you, something good that's happened to you in your life so we can focus on positive things. There was a man in there that had kind of a major meltdown. And he said, nothing good has ever happened to me. And he was showing signs of having a breakdown because of that. She was forcing him to think about something that he could not believe was true. You have to be very careful if you're working with people who are disturbed because of things that have happened to them in the past, because they are reliving those experiences. Within the next 3 or 4 segments, I'm going to be telling you things that if you can just trust me enough to believe what I say is true, it's going to help you a whole lot in dealing with abuse issues if you have them. If you don't have them, it'll be a source of knowledge and will help you to understand what people who are disturbed due to abuse go through, what they actually go through. But if you have been abused, I'm going to give you little segments of things that is going to help you to think a little differently, and it'll be more positively. But of course, naturally, I'm not going to force anything on you because I'm not your therapist. So anyway, these negative expectations, you don't expect anything is going to happen that's good. And you are never good enough. This is part of your self-concept. If you've been abused, if you've been badly abused, I've been abused because I'm not any good. See, there's a lot of shame that goes along with abuse. A person learns that they're not good enough. Now, that's not true, but they believe it to be true because that's what their experiences taught them. They will only believe what their experiences taught them. And if their parents were continually on them, or their caregiver was continually on them, or they were shifted from house to house to house because nobody, they felt, wanted them, and so they were constantly in foster care, they're going to think that they're not worthy. They're not worthy of care. They're not good enough. And so they will always feel that they are not good enough. But we will take care of that. We'll help you to think differently with that as time goes on. They have a fear of abandonment. There is a statement, you've probably heard it, I hate you, don't leave me. And what that means, psychologists use it a lot. I hate you, don't leave me. A person who has been negatively impacted by abuse will have a certain amount of hatred and anger toward the person who's abused them. But they realize also that they're dependent on that person for their very lives. If they're young, where else are they going to have care? Who's going to fix their meals? Who's going to take care of them if they're sick? They don't feel they can manage alone. And even if they're older, they don't feel that they're qualified to live alone and manage their life alone. So they stick with the abuser. I hate the abuse. Don't leave me. I need to have your care because I won't survive without it. I hate you. Don't leave me. We'll work with these things. I'm telling you these things because it's rampant in society with people who have been abused. I want to tell you these things, and so it's going to sound maybe a little difficult to listen to. However, there are ways of working around these things to feel better, and we will be doing that. They feel that they have been never wanted. Nobody wants them. They feel that they must have control of everything. These people, it's very hard to have relationships with them, and that's why in the other segment when I talked about knowing who you are and building relationships on the basis of who you are, and one of the questions I asked was, do you have to control? A person who has been abused has a tendency to want to control because they feel if they are in control, that gives them a sense of security. If I can control you, then I can make an outcome in a situation, and that makes me feel secure because I can manage you in a way that ensures that there's a certain outcome. It's not the best way to have a relationship, but the person who's been abused will feel that way. Now, I would never do that with a person. I would let a person have their own way, explore, and do what's right for them. I would never try to control another human being. But people who are abused do have that issue, trying to control somebody, because if you have control, you feel secure. Likewise, if you don't have control, you can't perceive a certain outcome, then you're going to feel very insecure. And so what do you try to do to feel secure? Somehow gain control. Now you have to realize that nobody ever has control. Things that happen to us we can't control. You know, if you're working and you're doing well and suddenly you get struck down with a heart attack, how are you going to control that? You don't have the control that you think you have, but you will try to have the control over another person because that's going to make you feel more secure. And then along with that, you must always be right. And I mentioned that in the last segment. You must always be right. Are you a person that has to be right all the time? You feel more comfortable and in control and safer if you can say that you're right. But it's hard for anyone to have a relationship with you because no one's right all the time. We'll work with that. People who have been abused are not worthy, feel like they are not worthy of love. They're not worthy of success, and they will sabotage their success. If they get this big promotion and things are going well, they will do something to sabotage it. Why? Because they don't feel worthy to have it, so they will do something to destroy it. And also they have difficulty making decisions. I don't know how many people I've talked to who have been abused who say, can I make a decision about this? Do I have the right to make a decision about this? And I always have to reassure them, we have a lot more rights to make decisions than what we think we do. If anything comes up, I make a decision about it. You know, and the way to teach a child how to make a decision is to let him do it. And on a very minuscule scale when they're young, you know, it's cold out, you got to wear a sweater. But you can wear the red sweater, the blue sweater, or the green sweater, but you have to wear a sweater. So you are arranging for a child to learn how to make decisions, but within a safe parameter, the parameter which you set for them. But people who have been abused say to me all the time, do I have the right to say this? Do I have the right to feel this? Do I have the right to make a decision about this? And it's very hard for them because most of the time when they've been abused, people have been telling them what to do. No, you can't go to that movie. No, you can't see your friend. No, you can't visit your parents. Because I want you with me. What they want is not to have anybody else know about the abuse. So they restrict the person and take over their lives and tell them what they can and can't do. And it's basically to force them to obey them so that other people don't know that they're being abused. But that's something that we can deal with. So we don't have much time left. I'd like to go, I will at some point go into all of these things, what they mean, how you can work with them, how you can get rid of or deal with the trauma that's involved with them. I will be going into the fears and emotions next week of what abused people fear and what they feel and the behavior that they have in terms of not allowing themselves to be free because they're afraid of it, not allowing themselves to have good, healthy relationships because they are so ashamed of themselves for no reason. You are never, if you've been abused, I'll just say this because time is short and I need to close it off, but if you have been abused, it is never your fault. You are never to blame. You are just as worthy as anybody else. You have just as much value as anybody else. You have just as much right to make a decision as anybody else, and you need to be able to free up to become the normal person that God intended you to be. And hopefully, as I discuss this more and more, you'll be able to do that. But I'm not your therapist, and you may well need therapeutic help to achieve that. But at least I can kind of get you started in the right direction. So I will close this off for now, and we'll continue with this next time. Please join me then.